one.
Oh, for sure. You can count me on that.
So everybody, I'm looking at the attendance, and we're pretty much where we want to be. And I'm sure there'll be other people that will join as we go forward. So Albert, I suggest that we get started since we have a pretty full agenda.
Great.
And I'll let
Sure.
you kick it off.
All right. Well, thank you for joining, everyone. Good morning. The webinar will be on software quality assurance and the trends that we saw in 2020 and the predicted trends in 2021. So to quickly go over the agenda, we're going to be starting with a brief introduction of SQALogic. Then we're going to go with some examples of the current situations as well as some difficulties faced by many small, medium, and large companies. Then a presentation of what we offer to help organizations or businesses of all sizes. And finally, a demonstration with a quick Q&A period. Just want to note that we do have a lot of data to go through. So anyone who's joined, if you want to have a copy of the document or a sit down with our experts, please feel free to reach out afterwards and we'll schedule a one-on-one with you individually. Now over to David for the quick introduction of SQALogic.
Okay, so just wanted to let everybody know we are recording the session, and it is also being broadcasted on our YouTube channel. So this will be available after the fact as well. So if you want to share this presentation with other colleagues of yours, feel free to do so. In addition to that, if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to use the Q&A tab up on top. Our team members will be monitoring the questions and answers and either propose them as we're going through the presentation if appropriate, or keep them for the roundtable with the Q&A experts at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to push forward and give you a quick 2 minutes of who we are. So we're SQALogic. We've been around for since 2012 when I founded this organization. And basically, we're a network center of excellence, individuals who are passionate about quality assurance and testing spanning the globe. We basically aid organizations in deployment of technology and also optimization of practices and technology around quality assurance testing, DevOps transformation, and Agile. And basically, we welcome those big challenges. Most of our mandates are done fixed bid with our customers, and we aim at measuring the success factor and ensuring that we derive value for you. Myself, I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. It's been a long ride in testing. I started off way back when in the CompuWare and Mercury days of the world, and have specialization in IT governance, application delivery, application management. As of late, been doing a lot of work around BDD and TDD implementations from a test practice strategy, as well as implementations and modernization of testing strategies within Agile and DevOps moves that organizations are doing. Luigi, a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Luigi Iuliani. As I know David for a long time as well, been in the industry over 20 years. I got involved in many department within this SDLC, especially in the quality assurance, implementing a lot of these test strategy, helping clients in modernizing their infrastructure frameworks, and heavily involved in the DevSecOps industry for being a panelist or helping clients in deploying their solution or new processes.
Thank you, Luigi. Oren?
Hi, everyone. My background, I've been in the tech industry for over 22 years. I've been mostly building products for developers. IBM, there was WebSphere, there was distributed communications, there was compiler engineer at Cadence, that was more hardware, language for hardware testing. In the last decade, I've been focusing on end-to-end testing. I was the founding member in Aptitude, that's a visual validation product. And in the last 6 years, I founded Testim, which leverages AI to help you build end-to-end testing and more stable tests.
Thank you. And I'm going to put this up here. This is Princess Pishka. I have to, since we're living in COVID world right now and we have to do all these sessions from home, she is our mascot at SQALogic, Siberian kitten. And she does tend to love screens and jump in front of them every once in a while. So if you see her, I do apologize for that. If you have questions for Pisco, feel free to ask them as well. No problem there. But I felt it was important just to mention that you might see her pop by the screen as we go through the presentation. So without further ado, let's get into some of the content over here.
Yeah,
So,
perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I just wanted to take this one just to let people know that most of the information that we based ourselves on was on the quality report, the World Quality Report. Now the new edition is out. So basically, David, if you have a little bit of the history on the report itself, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, so the World Quality Report is a report that's been generated now for 12 years. It's at its 12th edition. Every year, consortium of organizations, in this case, Sogeti, Capgemini, and Micro Focus, query experts around the world who specialize in development initiatives and quality assurance practices. In this particular case, you can see the split by regions as far as where the individuals came from. It was a total of 1,750 individuals spread out with various roles. 25% of those roles were actually CIOs, 20% IT directors, 19% QA testing managers, and so forth. And basically a number of employees, you see that down there. So it's well spread out, traverses most of the different types of industries from fintech to public sector, telecom, retail, and so forth. And it's a good way to get a pulse on the evolution of the testing and quality trends that are happening. So we like, as an organization, comparing the last couple of years and looking at how the mentalities have changed and the focuses have changed. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the trends that came out in the last report and have a little bit of a dialogue amongst ourselves and exchange on that. So if you have questions as we go forward, like I said, feel free to use the Q&A section. We'll be happy to address those as we go forward. So when we look at the World Quality Report, one of the interesting stats that come out from an overall perspective is the definition of the role of the QA practice. What we have over here is a graph that summarizes 2018, 19, and 20. And one of the things that's really interesting to denote over here is there's a lot of the traditional things that we're used to seeing as far as being responsible for automating tests or speeding up releases of software or protecting the corporate image even to a certain degree. These are things that we've seen consistently year over year. What we have seen that's interesting is this trend where in 2021 or in 2020, 2021 in this last report is this push since 2019 of the requirements of quality practices to be drivers of business growth and business value and directly tied to business outcomes. So the dollars being spent towards QA are being measured specifically directly towards business outcomes. I find this extremely interesting and a big break from the tradition that we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, where QA was all about making sure there's no bugs in software, but that direct tie to business wasn't there. So I'm going to basically open it up to Luigi and Oren. Do you have anything that you would like to say to that effect of what you guys are seeing as well?
Yeah, I see the trend, and I'll try to explain where it's coming from. First of all, it's coming from upstairs, like literally the business from the CEO. They say we want to move faster. The shift to agile and all the shift left that we see also. It's all becoming from speed. Companies want to move faster, and you can see like in the last, I think I remember like 15 years ago, in IBM we were released once a year, and then once every 6 years. Now people want to release every 5 minutes. They want to move faster, and in order to move faster, you have to change the entire way of how you do things, and it's important for the business to move faster. And in order to do that, that means you still want to make sure that the quality is the one of the most important thing. So I think it's becoming they can see the correlation between that was I think a couple of years ago, that was something that might hinder the business, if that part doesn't adapt back to the align to the business needs. And I think they see the change, the change that's needed, and we're seeing that's the result that we're seeing.
Yeah, I find it interesting that we're in a time right now where it's a good time to be a QA practitioner, right? I mean, I've been in this industry, like I said, for 20 years, and I can say the first 5 years, we were the black sheep, right? We were that organization that's like, oh no, QA, not that. They're that cost center that we have to go through, right? It wasn't as sexy or as cool as being in dev or releasing a product. Whereas right now, this notion of QA really being responsible for business assurance and contributing to that growth. And in fact, it's, I see that directly tied as well to this whole digital happiness and ensuring end user satisfaction and a proper customer experience, and measuring how that replicates to growth within the organization is quite interesting. Luigi, do you have anything else that you'd like to add? No?
Yeah, I think, David, yes. I think because of the user experience demand in the market, QA is much more closer now to the customer in terms of user acceptance. So the pyramid has been shifted upside down, and there's a bigger need in satisfying the customer much more quicker and much more closer in terms of requirements.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think they know the product. The QA people usually know the product even better than developers, as good as the product person, if not even more.
Absolutely. So let's move on, because we got a lot of elements. So we're going to go through about 6 different topics as we go through this presentation. The first of which is going to be around Agile and DevOps adoption and the progression of that. The momentum of automation and what we're seeing from that perspective. Something that's going to be dear to Oren's heart, I'm sure, is AI adoption and how that's increasing as an important factor for various reasons. Test environment management, test data management, and how that's progressing throughout the years. The pressure on quality assurance budgets and what that means to you. And finally, an interesting point that was addressed for this specific report is the global pandemic and how that has accelerated dramatically, actually, in a lot of areas, digital transformation strategies and programs that existed within organizations. So we're going to get started. And the first section is around Agile and DevOps adoption. So when we think about DevOps and agility, right? If you look at the 2015 state of the DevOps report, and this has only continued to be consistently proven since that time, is high-performing IT organizations that are deploying DevOps and Agile strategies are deploying, and you mentioned this, Oren, 30 times more frequently at a minimum, right? And sometimes, in some cases, they're deploying changes into production constantly multiple times a day versus one time a year release cycles that we were used to seeing. They're deploying, 200 times shorter lead times to doing these deployments, right? So instead of having months, if not a year to deploy, you're deploying things very rapidly into production. And the interesting aspect is by using proper strategies around Agile and DevOps, they're doing this with 60% fewer failures and 68 times faster pushes into production. So, the question is, who doesn't want that, right? Everybody wants that. And me personally, in the companies that I've been working with, this is a trend that we're seeing more and more of. And even though I don't see, a whole lot of shops that have gone fully agile across all projects and all spheres, I do see more and more areas, including SAP projects and mainframe projects, that are adopting Agile and DevOps practices in the way they do things. Oren, Luigi, anything to add?
Yeah, basically, this is the big shift right in the industry is really the main goal is not, I know this is where customers are trying to do, depending on the industry, to deliver as fast as possible into production, but it's really to deliver the right thing into production. And that's the mindset that it's growing out there these days that I notice by client. because a lot of the automation were built around either infrastructure to ease the maintenance or the building or the bring it up the infrastructure, but very less was thought about building the right pipelines in terms of the release management. So enterprise release management is a key word out there today, and it needs to be aligned with the DevOps. That's a crucial aspect.
Good point.
I think what you mentioned, by the way, David, regarding the mainframe, that was funny, but it's super correct. I saw there's companies that release straight to production, and imagine a company that they release to deploy to a hospital. They deploy every 6 months. That's it, no longer. Internally, they will release. They will have the same sprints every week or 2 weeks, and they do. And the reason is because it's faster for them. It's not just the equivalent for the customer, it's also for them getting the feedback faster. The automation allows you, and there's different types of automation, right? From something real fast, like unit test to get the feedback in seconds or minutes, and API and full integration. Getting the feedback faster, not waiting 6 months to get you, hey, you have a bug here. The developers are more focused, and it's better for them to understand. And that's why you see also less failures in production.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good points. So DevOps adoption, what are the, this is interesting because these are the approaches that organizations are using to speed up and optimize testing in Agile and DevOps. And what's something that we're seeing is 52% of organizations right now that were queried are preparing and executing tests as early as possible. So this is in the whole notion of doing code coverage and unit level tests at the code level. And naturally that implies maximizing the automation of tests and efforts to do that, because as we know, if we're trying to deploy change and 2-week sprints, well, we can't have a 2-3 week testing period after that sprint is done, right? We need to be able to fit our testing strategies in that continuous evolution process. And the only real way to successfully do that is via proper automation, not only of the test cases themselves, but of the processes that drive that. And, I find it very interesting to see the way that the level of adoption that we're seeing over here in Notion to this. And I want to point that we got to take into consideration that the organizations that are being queried in this case, those 1,750 organizations, are organizations that have a level of maturity and that have been participating in these surveys now for a good number of years. So what this is basically telling you, it's not necessarily a bad thing if your organization isn't there yet, but you should use this as an indicator of a driver towards elements that will give you good value. And as Oren and Luigi were stating, the faster we find an anomaly, right, the sooner we can address that, the most efficient we can be from a cost perspective of what it takes to fix that and mitigate the problems that are impacted as it goes forward. An anomaly that's left in the system, the longer it's there, the more costly and the more impact it'll have when you find it and you remove it. So this notion of shifting left is definitely something that's interesting.
Yeah, and I just want to add something quickly, David. Is the last bullet at the end at 29% is it's becoming more predominant in the industry, not only as a tool but also like crawlers looking for deriving new test cases where there might be pocket holes in some of the coverage that was missed. So this is something to be on the radar. It's coming very important.
Yep, I agree. And that's actually, we don't have the evolution over time. This was a new question this year, but it's going to be very interesting to see when the 2021-22 report comes out. I think that comes out around November, December, to see how we're going to see the evolution of this. I too would expect to see that element go up. I would also expect to see more trends towards quality dashboards as far as continuous monitoring and establishing that proactive element of going from what happens further down and how we can then do postmortems and understand how we can get more efficient and put proper barriers in tests so that we find those problems faster. So
and there's a vertical coming up in that area where it's called chaos testing. Chaos testing is something around inputting various random parameters and see what are the different coverage you might get with different test cases. So Monkey and Gorilla are tools out there for that if you want to look at it. but chaos is something I think we need to add to the the rest of the testing strategy.
Mhm. By the way, this relates, Luigi, with testing in production a lot. And I think Netflix was one of the pioneers, took them a couple of years to stabilize their system and to have a system like that. But we need to, I think also I want to tell the audience that it depends a lot on your product. Like, for example, if you're a bank, that will never get approved. Say, oh, you know what? Let's see if there's a bug. So if transfer didn't work, if a customer complains, then we'll fix that, or we'll try to get that online, that we'll check and we see that one of the records isn't correct. I think it also depends highly on the type of product, the type of competition. It wouldn't fit all companies.
It's not a one size fits all. So it's a combination of shift left and shift right, and finding the right fit and mix of what you do where and when per your specific reality, right? So,
but to Oren's point, David, is I see a change in some of the banks here in Montreal, where they have teams now in production using fake accounts, fake branch, and fake a lot of the testing artifacts are being introduced into production just for that, exactly for that.
Yeah.
And it's a new idea, but the late adopters,
Agreed. And we see it because of the challenges also of replicating their production system in a pre-prod world, right? So there's so much interdependencies in their systems, and they're so complex that they've realized that the virtualization and creation of that in a test world, it never is fully representative of production. So hence, like you said, they're creating these false accounts to allow them to trigger those and use them from a testing perspective to ensure that they have as close to production tests as possible. And not everything is done there, right, Luigi? But you're right that it's again about finding that right sweet spot in that fit.
Yeah.
So the next section or topic that we're going to be going over is automation momentum and how that's risen in the QA lifecycle. So what's interesting over here is, these are some pretty high stats. When you say that out of the people that were queried, 53 and 51% of them, the two top elements is to me, it's almost justification. It's been 10 years now that I've been telling people that they need to focus on, if they're starting a practice and they want to get better, they got to start measuring these two elements, right? And the reason for that is when you measure code coverage, you're basically measuring the efficiency of your developers, and you're ensuring that the code that they're creating is defect and bug free from the core functionality of each one of those small units that they're building. And that in the long run adds to a lot of stability. And then on the other end of the spectrum, right, is if you stop measuring things on how many tests we built and how many tests we've automated, but you start switching that over to ensuring that your tests are doing what they're really there for, right? They're there to mitigate risk, right? And ensure that you're covering as much risk as possible to a push into prod. So by combining code and dev coverage from an efficiency of what you're building and risk and business functionality at the other end, you can ensure that you can actually achieve better results, all the while by building less test cases and maintaining less test cases in the long run at the other end of the spectrum, which reduces the cost of doing efficient development and so forth. So I found this statistics actually quite interesting. I'll let you guys add anything if there's something you want to say to this.
I think this is great. That ideally, I like to start even a project by saying, hey, what are the OKRs or the KPIs? Like, where are we going? What do I want to do? What do I do this quarter? And the fact that we even starting with deciding on this is our plan. This is where we want to be, and let's think of the best way to get there. That makes you think. I think one is you saw the trend that started. We were talking about production, and I think one thing that I'm trying to get the prophecy for 2 years from now, and we'll be here again, all of us 2 years from now, we'll see. And if that the coverage will be added also to production. Right now, I don't see a lot of coverage. They're always looking at pre-production. And that's test coverage. That's amazing that it's finally getting mature and getting the place that it belongs. But I don't see yet people who relates to coverage based on like Google Analytics or whatever my users doing in production. I still don't see that. And hopefully in 2 years we'll have even more coverage, more in depth for different aspects, as you said. That's not just the code coverage, but more of the that actually help you assess more the risk based on what's going on in production.
Good point.
Yeah,
very
Oren, I think you're right. It's just something starting. Again, going back to the user experience, where banks and other retail company I've seen, they're trying to do the correlation between those metrics from satisfaction to coverage to risk, and some other area we can do the traditional metrics reports in QA. So it's a new thing. It's starting, but it's very aligned with the user experience. Like Splunk or Dynatrace are doing things like this. They're trying to correlate the monitoring with your testing, and then a dashboard from a user aspect.
Right, tying what's happening in production from a defining what the right tests that you should be focusing on are when you push it into pre-prod, and then taking the metrics around where you've potentially had some instabilities in your pre-prod as you were building the application to adding more efficient monitoring into the monitoring space. So creating that loop of retroaction and information is definitely something that I would expect to see growth over in the next couple of years. So the role of QA, this is a very interesting one. And what's interesting is you'll notice some key trends that are compelling over here. So when we look at 2019, RPA, or robot process automation, was all about the notion of adding automation to production tasks, was actually something that had been growing for the last 2 years, had 43%. And this year we saw it drop to 35%. Development skills, right, which is something that we've seen now for the last 12 years about, and the reports as being something that the role of QA, a good QA individual, had to have base development skills because of the necessity of script creation and understanding the code they were testing and so forth. That again has dropped dramatically by 10 points, right, on the whole element. And a new one that came up that most people attributed as a key skill in the role of a QA tester was CI and CD skills. So for those who don't know, continuous integration and continuous delivery, right? Which is all around automating the automation, so to speak, or automating the whole process of the push and the compiles and pushes of code and builds into production and the maintenance and so forth. So what I find compelling about this is how the role of a tester is changing, right? It's changing, and it's changing dramatically as far as what we need to do. Now, my interpretation of why the development skills are being less requested or less seen as a requirement is because I think people with the technologies that are available right now that are embedding better frameworks and test creation, more modularization, artificial intelligence into script creation and maintenance and so forth, means that there's less of a dependency on being an expert coder or developer to achieve the goals of proper automation. And it also ties into the fact that if you look at the test data management skills, that's slowly growing. And to me, that's an indicator of maturity that's happening from a test perspective, because you don't really face the challenges around test data management from an automation perspective until you've got a certain level of maturity. So what are your thoughts around that, guys?
I agree with you 100%. Sorry. You can see that with the test data, it's not just about it. It's not getting hard to click, to make the clicks on a web application. That's not the hard part. With all this, the platform that allow you to do that easily, and then the challenge becomes, wait a second, what are the parts of the test? What do I want to test? You're starting to think, what will the user experience be? And managing, when you have thousands of tests, managing those test data and that information, that becomes your challenge and where you want to focus on. On the CI, we all know that the shift left doesn't mean you're not testing before production or in production. It just means you want to test some things, you want to test earlier. Everything is moving now to be CI/CD. I think that's the holy grail for any company. And even those that we said that I said that earlier, that release to the hospital once in the 6 months, they want to have that internally. I'll see that. I think we'll see that more and more pushing in. And I agree regarding the AI. I think people are relying more on a platform that will help them make those tasks easier so they can focus on their business.
Yeah, I totally agree. What Aaron just said. The only thing I would add to this slide, and it's not doing, is proper exposure on the BDD, the behavior-driven development. What it means for some of the clients in some of the industry, company in the industry I see today, is QA is a lot more involved in being also a functional analyst. So being the glue between developing some of the test scenario, but also confirming or satisfying or participating in some of the development of these functional features early enough in the cycle, which is I'm very more happy than 20 years ago when QA was in a silo mode and was fed at the last minute to be able to develop these test cases. So now their skills is more predominant around business analysts and understanding the system from a business function and not just from a feature function. It's a big shift.
It's a good point. I see it. I see the role of QA almost being subdivided now into different types of roles, right? So if you look at Microsoft and their push for the notion of the definition of an SDET, right, or the SDET, that basically is an individual who sits in the development team but has a specific role around quality, right? And in an agile element, they are those gates, if you want, from a quality perspective, and have the final sign off on that. And so they're very much tied to the development aspect of things and the code and so forth. And so therefore a very technical deep dive element. And then to your point, Luigi, we have the QA individuals that'll be much more tied to the business side of the role and how that all bridges together. And QA itself, that whole notion of having that siloed box, I think it has its role for certain aspects as far as center of excellence around test data management or environment. We'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward in the presentation, but more and more that role is being broken down and spread out as QA being an integral part of all areas, right? From inception of the project to what's happening in prod. So
yeah, I agree.
So AI adoption, Oren, I'm going to let you take this one since this is your background and your expertise. So you can talk to us a little bit about what's going on in AI.
Yeah, I think. So first of all, we see that AI is not just about it can help us in a lot of things, not just one thing. And it's not just about. I think it started with let's help you with the generation of the test. I think we're starting to see that AI can help with different aspects of the development lifecycle. Whether that's not, we started with the generation of the test, but then we saw, wait a second, those tests have to be stable. If the UI changes, one of the biggest reasons for people not failing with for example, with test automation, end-to-end testing, is that they claim that it's flaky, they don't trust it. There's literally erosion in trust if the build is failing all the time. So if you can use things like AI to actually automatically understand the changes in the application and update the tests, so it's not going to be flaky, those are the things that make you to make a successful test automation, for example, plan. I think we see that there's trending more and more. Let's see the results. Can AI look at the results and help you? I'll give you another example. If you have 200 failed tests, and I don't want to go over 200 tests right now. If something can scan those and actually help me scan those and tell me, oh, say you have 2 issues. You don't have to go over 200 tests. You have to go over 2 tests only, because 100 tests fail because of one reason, and the other 100 failed for another reason. That saves you a lot of time. So those kind of things, I see AI as starting to give you more intelligent about the day-to-day tasks, and I think it's going to grow even more, because it will tell you even more intelligent thing about your business, and I think the QA role is growing, as you said, into the business aspects, and it's not going to be, hey, how do I click on stuff? It's going to be more about, how do I understand whether am I doing the right thing or not? Are we going to the right audience? And you'll get more and more information, and the user experience will trend there as well.
Right. And what's interesting about the statistics of this report is how overwhelming they are towards this, right? Out of all the statistics that are part of this report, you can see it when you're talking about artificial intelligence, you can see 86%, right, of the respondents say that it is a new criterion as far as the selection around solutions, products, and tools in the quality assurance space. 88% of them basically say that it's the strongest growth part when it comes to testing activities, whether that's using it in their testing initiatives, using AI as part of helping them determine, as you mentioned, better tests and so forth. And on the other spectrum, testing out AI, right? So as AI is being embedded into their day-to-day operations, right? It's also testing out those AI capabilities, which has its own set of challenges when you're looking at testing an AI interface that's evolving, right? So
David, I'm going to throw something, maybe a little twist, a new thing. Maybe we should start a product as 3 around this. But
maybe that's the next thing.
the idea AI has been perceived as either as a holy grail, something that's going to solve everything, or it's just something that will eventually disappear. What I mean by that is we have the continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous testing. I think we should add AI more as a continuous feedback system, like something that will help from the get-go, from the beginning, continuously sending information to the QA organization or center of excellence or any practice within the software development that use QA, in terms of the type of coverage missing, the next test scenario, the data that should be used. So it should be a continuous feeding system to the QA group organization, in terms of always and obviously aligned with specific parameters. You can see this as a neural layers from an AI system, where you can feed it either by the data you're going to be used, the type of scenario you're looking for, like a BDD approach, for example, the type of metrics, the user experience stuff. And then the AI system should give you continuous feedback around impact analysis, around coverage, around satisfaction. But all this should be the central engine of your strategy in terms of testing.
Yeah, I like it. You both of you have brought forward the point of AI and sort of where we see it as experts and where we'd like to see it go, right? So, to me, AI, we saw this coming up about 4 or 5 years ago on the radar, and I got some demonstrations of some of the early companies that had gone down that path, and it looked interesting. The promise was good, but then you try it out, and it was still, AI was still being used at a very tactical level, right? And I think both of you are right that where I would like to see this, and where I think I'd like to see the industry trend, is where we start bringing AI and tying it much more to business outcomes, which goes as well with some of the requirements that business want, right? They want QA to be directly measurable and tied to business outcomes. So if we are able to create proactive dashboards and use this as the sounding board that gives us information on what we should be testing and how we should be adapting things and where focus should be and so forth, that is definitely, as you guys mentioned, the holy grail of where we can take things to help us target QA and testing initiatives into the right spaces. So very good point, guys.
David, you said something which is right on the spot when you said, "Hey, I tried, I think 6 years ago, and I think the numbers now actually prove your point that those platforms are becoming more mature. It takes a long time to get there, to get really, really mature. You can see that with the autonomous cars and how long there's a lot of standards there that they have to go, but it's getting mature. And I think here, same with what's called autonomous testing, it will get there. It's getting the fact that it's really, really helpful, and we can see the adoption.
Good points. Okay, so test environment management and testing data management is evolving. Okay, so when we look at the statistics around the satisfaction in achieving targets related to test environments, test data, and so forth, what I find shocking is less than 50% of the organizations feel that they've achieved a robust configuration for test environments, feel that they have timely availability of the right test environments, and that the modernization of those and the move to the cloud is happening at the efficiency that they want, and so forth. And honestly, I can't discredit these results from my own personal experiences. This is one of the most challenging areas for organizations to get right and do right. Test environments and making sure that those are representative of production, and building proper test data subsets that represent the data, but that are also safe and cleansed and not pose a risk from a security perspective either. I see this as being another big target over the next couple of years. And I think organizations that specialize in test tool development are going to be putting some strong efforts towards this. Now that we've kind of achieved the cracking the code on building test frameworks and test cases and so forth that are buildable and maintainable and derive value for longer than just one iteration of the application cycle, so we can get incremental value from that perspective. To me, the next space is really in this area over here around improving the types of data that's used and the representation of those test environments to be close to production. So yeah, those are.
Luigi, that's your startup. You wanted an idea for a startup. This is it. This is it. I agree. This is one of the biggest challenges. Is we see other challenges of the test authoring and the stability are getting solved. This is still one of the biggest challenges that I see out there.
Yeah.
Because now you want to have tests in scale, and we're talking about thousands of tests. Like, wait a second, how do I do it in this environment, in that environment, the test data, and it keeps on changing, right? The product doesn't stay. So those, you can call it fixtures, mark. There's like so many things, so many different, even the naming is not even consistent, and it's a challenge, not just. I think it's one of the biggest challenge of 2021 that needs to be hopefully be resolved. Bye, Luigi.
Yeah, no, I agree, Oren. I've been in this since 2007, actually, when I was at TDS Insurance. It's very difficult using a static first generation, second generation, third generation tool in test data management. This is one area, potentially AI, because the approach needs to be changed. It doesn't work. Even today, there's a lot of stuff we can do much better, but it's still heavy. I know it's an heavy weight, and it's very costly. So yes, I agree. There is still a lot of work to be done, and I think AI could help a lot here in this industry. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. There are things, if you're listening to this, there are things that you can do to get better at this area. But that being said, it remains one of the challenging areas. But I think it's a good timing right now to start assessing how you can do things better, improving your practices internally so that you're aligned with deploying what I believe is the technologies that are going to be seen coming out in the next couple of years. And like you said, yeah, this might be one of those areas where we should put our QA brains together and see what we can do, because this is one of those challenging areas. So this is an interesting one. You're going to like this, guys. This is the pressure on quality assurance budgets has increased. Okay. So look at this trend over here. Okay. Consistently, year over year over year over year for many, many years. And you see 2013, but if you were to go further back all the way down to the beginning of this, you would have seen a gradual rise of the allocation of the percentage of IT budgets that were being attributed to QA activities, right? And if you notice, from 2013 to 2014 to 2015, there was this increase. In fact, there was a pretty big bump from 2014 to 2015 of almost 10% increase in percentage of IT budget spends. And as you know, that's a big chunk of number, right, of dollars. But what's interesting is after that, and 2015 is the inception of Agile and DevOps and maturity being attained in those areas, you gradually see this trend start going down, right? And right now in 2020, we're sitting at 22% of the IT budget being allocated to QA. And I would expect to see, this continue to go down a little bit and eventually stabilize. Now, what I attribute this to is the fact that with the adoption of more mature methodologies around how we're deploying change and not waiting a year to do testing and having agile sprints and DevOps methodologies and CI/CD that automate the processes of deploying code and removing human error, we're able to reduce the overall cost still while achieving a higher level of quality that we're pushing into production. Now, what I want to point out is, if I were to take this graph and I were to say, let's take an organization who hasn't adopted that change, who's still using traditional methodologies, who's still, more manual, less automated, and is failing in achieving that goal and doesn't have proper dashboards and everything that goes with it, the trend is probably going to keep going up from 35 to 40% to 42 to 45, right? It's all about, this trend that we're seeing in this drop down. We got to take into account that these are, again, around those 1,750, audited organizations that have a fair degree of maturity and are down that path of improving their processes and, adding metrics and deploying tools. So what it tells me is you have a choice over here, right? If you're not on this bandwagon yet and you're not going down that path of automating your tests and measuring and changing your strategies and what you're looking at, you're going to continue spending more and more towards quality to achieve a fair degree of quality. Whereas if you invest right now, and you can see it's still a significant investment, right? There was that 10% hike in investment that first year when the organizations made the move and the trend towards adopting these. They had to spend more in that year, right? From 2014 to 2015. But after that, it started going back down. And, by 2017, they were back at 26, and then gradually it kept going down, right? And now they have more stability, faster releases, and so forth. So I find this graphic extremely compelling and a good indicator of we're on the right path with these changes. So what are your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I think the budget is relative, right, Dave? Because a lot of these activities now are also done much more earlier in the cycle. Like you see business analysts finding defects early in their documentation or requirements. So there's things that are much more mature the beginning of the phase of starting a sprint or release than it used to be, and almost everybody's a QA today within an agile team or a Scrum team, right? So it's just a change of perception, but it will vary. It will still vary. I don't think it has a direct impact of the tool you're using, but it's more about the mindset.
Yeah, methodologies, mindset, and the way you're approaching.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see the correlation between those type of companies that say though that the spend has been decreased, and the correlation, by the way, to shifting left.
Mm-hmm.
Whether by the way, it could be. I think I agree with you, David, about the way you see it. But it's also, but what Luigi said, I think is also correct. That some of the spend maybe we don't see directly on QA activities, but it's also moving a bit, shifting left toward the engineers, and maybe they don't name it just as the same. Because if developer spends 5% of his time on QA activities, it's hard to tag that and say, hey, we're spending X amount of time there. The DevOps, it's hard to see if you have an account in the cloud. It will be a little bit harder to understand. Okay, we have five VM which are going to browser allocation, and the rest are going to other services or other things which are unrelated testing. It's hard to tag them today. Luigi, that's another startup idea, but but I agree with you that once you invest a lot in the beginning, you'll see it paying off.
Mechanisms used to make testing more efficient. So organizations are using various things such as implementation of intelligent autonomous test solutions, so AI and self-repairing tests and so forth, as well as naturally, as we mentioned, the whole notion of shift left and do testing earlier and moving some of those testing responsibilities into the dev world and even above and beyond the dev world, where we're actually analyzing the actual specs that are defined as a project to find out if there's potential problems at that level. But there are mechanisms that are being put in place. The top three being shift left, implement the intelligent autonomous test solutions, and again looking at enhancing the test environment provisioning. So using cloud-based technologies and virtualization and so forth to allow you to build and deploy more efficiently those areas. And again, I think that that's one of those areas we're going to see grow again over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the shift left on top there. From shift left is already, I think, already about 10 years old, if I'm not mistaken. A concept that's out there. What I like to, anyway, when I go into some of the engagement with customer, what I like to give as a picture instead is more like it's not a totally shift left, because to me now it's shifting your responsibility to the development. Everything should be tested in development type thing, right? I prefer to say like a lot of the testing from a granularity aspect. So from, unit and integration testing should be handled in percentage, 80% from dev and 20% QA. Then once you get into the user acceptance or end-to-end, this is where I think the QA team should focus really around business scenario, making sure that works from what we deliver from a face point to a customer, what is going to be experiencing as a customer. That's where I think QA should spend most of their time, 80% and 20% Q and dev. And then in the DevOps aspect or the operation aspect, this is where I bring into the concept of doing chaos or, unassisted testing, or you put some team from a business analyst division where they can look for other pocket test or pocket defect they might have missed during the scenarios. So I prefer to go with this approach than just segregating the responsibility of pushing left, middle, or right, and making it more balanced from what you'll be delivering as a role. This is where you should be focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Type of expertise in the right areas. Again, yeah, I agree with you on that, Luigi. It's great, this notion of shift left, and I think it's an important vision to have, because a lot of organizations were simply not thinking quality or thinking testing from a dev perspective. So having those metrics around code coverage and shift left is good, but it's also about changing the types of tests that your QA analysts are responsible for. Those that are tied more to the business, well, we should automate those key critical business transactions and have that run regularly and liberate them from reviewing again code level type things that should already be tested, and have them do much more, as you're mentioning, chaos exploratory based testing, and using their innate skill sets that they have to be able to go find those nitty gritty, harder to find anomalies, therefore stabilizing the system even more and offering a better end user experience. Yeah.
By the way, there's something here that actually it's not here, which is, I think that I see more and more is that but this is the symptoms it's of it, which is, first of all, the quality is moving more and more toward the responsibility of the engineer. The QA is not a gate that says, hey, I don't allow you to release anymore. I think it's going to a point when it's merged into the developers, and engineers they do give them, hey, this is your responsibility, because we want you to own the code of the application that you're building. You have to own that. And part of that is knowing and understanding about the quality, but it doesn't mean that they have to write the test. So I think some parts will be, for example, as you said, unit test. I think it will be a responsibility of the developers, the application developers, to write the unit test and to maintain them. But the authoring of the end-to-end testing, I think this is where what will happen more and more, that we'll see mixed. What I mean by mixed is that you'll see the QA, maybe, or the business analyst creating those tests, but some of those tests will run even earlier in the phase, and if they fail, the developer will just get, hey, here you had a failing test. It's an end-to-end test that failed, even on a pull request. Before it was even merged to master, before it was a release candidate, here's an end-to-end test that failed, and take a look at that. And I think that in the future we'll see more and more that if it's going to be easier for the developer to fix the test themselves, not the author of the test, but to fix it, say, yeah, I changed something, the flow is a bit different, they'll do it also. They'll even do it themselves. So you'll see a mix and a collaboration between the teams. And as you said, shifting left, shifting right, it's gonna merge together.
Yeah, and I think when an anomaly is trapped, regardless of where it is, even if you have, I guess the equivalent of what I would call a QA analyst or a tester that's more close to the business, who's running end-to-end tests and traps an anomaly that is uncovered. I think it's important to proactively then take a look at that anomaly and say, okay, so it's great we trapped it before it hit production, but could we have done a test earlier on that would have actually trapped this sooner in the process, right? Because if you can actually then say, okay, so it's great that we trapped it over here from a business perspective, but you know what, we could have had a unit test that we could have built and caught this, weeks before, months before, and have it not actually reach that gate, then it's even better. So to me, it's all about the whole notion. The way I see shift left is about, it's dependent on that proactivity or that retroactivity of saying, okay, so something happened. How do I analyze what happened and see, okay, where could I most efficiently added something as a gate to trap that, and then add that back in, and then continuously reassess. So it's not just about fixing a bug and continuing on forward. It's fixing a bug and understanding why that bug made it to where it did, and was there a way that we could have done things better.
And that's where the AI will eventually will help in that
exactly
area.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Boy, I tell you, we keep coming back to that AI and assessment and analysis. There's definitely something there.
All right, gentlemen. Sorry to cut you off. We're running low on time here before we get into the question parts, and we have one more section to go. Did you want to add one last comment on the last topic?
No, I'm good. That's good.
Great.
So the last element that we wanted to talk about is what the pandemic has changed, right? So to me, what I've seen is, naturally at the beginning, there was a lot of instability and insecurity around how this was going to impact things. And, everywhere around the world, there was a bit of a different way, the way that the pandemic was dealt with. But a lot of places ended up with lockdowns and closures and non-capacity to go into the office, which, over the last, 5 years or so, there's been a big trend towards digital transformation and porting elements to the cloud and rendering more accessible from the outside world, access to the internal assets and so forth to render employees more efficient. What this has done is, if you look at the stats from doing that, is rapidly, everybody had to work from home, and you had to have access to your elements, and opening up VPNs and creating access to Zoom sessions and so forth. What this typically did is raise security concerns. So you went from having a few individuals who randomly and every once in a while access their systems remotely, to all of a sudden having to open things up and having everybody be able to access to do their day-to-day work. So security concerns were definitely one that had, most organizations said that they had at least a slight increase, if not a significant increase, in efforts put into security testing around these types of things. There were, budget reductions on average of about 13% of budgets that were reduced, probably because certain projects were shelved and pushed in. I don't think this is a trend that is going to be consistent. I would expect this to, as we hopefully get out of this pandemic phase in 2021 and into 2022, that we're capable of realigning and getting these projects back on track. But the one thing that organizations did, and Luigi and Oren and myself were talking about this yesterday, is a lot of organizations took this sort of pause, if you want, to formally reassess their QA goals and practices, right? And how they do things and what their definition of why QA exists and so forth, and look at improving things. A lot of organizations use that to take the pause and operate a fair level of overhaul. And if you look at the bottom, 27% of them said that they leveraged that to change or to work on their quality goals somewhat. 34% a lot, and 18% use that time, which is still 20% of these organizations, to do a major rehaul of the QA goals and practices. I can say that from my customers, I've seen a lot of this as well. We have 5-6 less projects that need to go live in the year. Let's take that downtime to look at how we can do things better and how we can measure things better and establish dashboards and so forth. So yeah, that's in line with what I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, my end. The only thing I'm going to say on this is, from some of the customer I talked to today, is I think it's more on the slide number 1 around security concern. I've seen there's a lot more demand in them integrating and seamlessly building a strategy around, let's put it this way, DevSecOps of things. So security is one component now, is taking in the pandemic a little bit more predominant role in the QA group.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to say, Luigi, not only that you're right, but I think it will be more broader, the shift left to bring things more to the earlier stage, and not only testing the user experience, but also, you said, security. I think there will be more testing accessibility. Why do we need to test accessibility only in the later or just before going to production? Why does it have to be manually? I think we'll see more of that in moving also back to the earlier stage as well. I think you're right.
Indeed. So last question is, how has your focus changed towards QA activities to meet the challenges caused by COVID-19? There's a couple of stats over here, like a lot of them basically say that the focus was changed directly towards customer experience validation and usability testing. I would say that this is probably even more predominant in the retail space, because there's a lot of retail organizations, namely in Canada. I can't talk for everywhere around the world, but with all the stores that were forced to close down and go through their holiday seasons and their Black Fridays and everything that goes with it without having their storefronts open, it basically drove a lot of their their buying capability of their customers to their online presence. So therefore, focusing on that customer experience became very important, right? Knowing that that was the way that people were going to interact with their business, and that was how they were going to secure their revenue. So to me, that was the most telling metric of this particular graph. Oren, Luigi, do you have anything you want to add here?
This one, well, essentially is, again, it's, I'm not surprised, the customer experience. It's really around aligning your QA strategy from a user experience. It's very important today.
Yeah, I'm nothing to add. You guys said it.
That's right. So this is with regards to the post-pandemic views that organizations have, and some of the stats that came out or feedback that was received. What I found really interesting is the number one element up on top. It's something that I've been, as SQALogic, we've been working on building the SQALogic community and network and so forth to bridge that expertise. QA has been one of these things where everybody kind of almost operates and has been operating in their own little silos, right? And we all build our expertise and so forth. And one of the reasons that I started SQALogic 7 years ago versus just becoming an independent consultant and doing my own thing was I'm a people person, and I like bouncing and doing soundboard type activities. If I can do an event like this where I'm with Oren and Luigi and other people, other experts, and we can, soundboard off of each other and say, what do you think about this? And where do you think it could go? I think that notion, and you can see, because it was one of the things that, as the world itself locked down, we all ended up locked down in our little houses, and we were deprived from that communication, if you want. One of the things that's coming out is, I think the culture around the QA community needs to open up, and we need to share, what are the successes that we're having with other organizations and other QA practitioners, and sort of solidify that. So to me, it's great to see that, because it's something that I've been touting for the last couple of years and trying to build, and something I would like to leave as a legacy as I depart my career eventually, to say, hey, you know what, when we started off, it was like that, but we really bridged that community, and we were able to globally overall improve quality and software releases, not just for organization A, B, or C, but overall the quality of software that was being delivered, we were able to improve it. So yeah, that would be my sense on that.
Yeah, I would just put also the attention on the last one. I know it looks the smallest, but that's 3 out of 4 companies saying that we need to automate more. I think we're still not there. We're still not in a place where everything's automated all the time. I think the shift is pushing now even stronger. I know it seems like it's the smallest of those questions here, but I think most of the companies don't have a great automation in place, or none at all, by the way. I think this is just getting we're just in the beginning of the big leap that everyone's pushing toward automation right now.
And maybe David, what's going to come out of this post-pandemic is they're gonna realize we're gonna need more performance and load testing exercise around distributed systems. So
well, you know what? We're geared for that. We got LoadLogic ready to go. If you guys want to take a look at that, visit our website. But yeah, no, I agree with you. In fact, I was surprised that I think the thing is people fell into almost like the pandemic forced a panic mode, right? And people were caught without a plan in action. But I agree with you that now that things are stabilized and everybody sort of secured put the boards in the windows and secured everything without everything crashing and burning, that whole notion of proactively assessing your performance limits and so forth, so that we're better prepared for these things going forward. I mean, let's face it, right? There's one organization that came out of this as a huge, tremendous winner, and that's Amazon, right? Amazon, they rock and roll, but because they built an infrastructure that they could rapidly scale, right? And they have an online ordering system that's efficient and distribution and so forth. And I'm not saying that every organization, if you're the small shop on the corner that sells a couple of items out of your store and you built your online presence, sure, I'm not asking you to be Amazon, right? But that being said, you do have to establish and understand what are your limits of your system and what are the risks and how do you improve performance, because it's a known fact when you're talking about performance that the patience of individuals on the web, if your website is taking over 2-3 seconds to load, you're having people that are leaving that site. They're not completing that transaction. They're not going forward. So it's important.
We also have a great example of what happened to Parler, right? They haven't tested what happened if the old infrastructure goes down.
Yeah, if that happens, it's pretty much gone.
Yeah.
So guys, that was the end, I believe, of the actual overview of the 2020 findings and 2021 trends. At this point, we want to open it up to questions and answers. And by the way, this doesn't have to be specifically around the topic over here. Oren and myself and Luigi are happy to, if you have a question around quality assurance that's been boggling you or you want to ask something, feel free to go ahead. If it's generic, then we'll answer it now. If not, we can take it offline as well and get back to you. So feel free to take advantage of the next 15-20 minutes or so that's left in the presentation. And if you have questions, write them in the Q&A section and Albert will convey them to us.
Yeah, I'm currently standing by.
Or questions about cats.
Questions for the cat. She'll be happy to. I can go get her and show her to you. She'll be very happy to, do whatever she does.
Oh, so that's I think usually people call things randomly with the keyboard like monkey test. They should start calling that cat testing.
Yeah.
Yeah. She is very good at pressing a bunch of keys and creating the laptop to do funny things. So there's no questions. I'm surprised nobody has anything that they want to ask or bring forward or.
Oh. Corinne, thank you. And by the way, I think it also should be now that I have a little baby. She's a little bit under a year old, and she found out this thing that is playing around with this thing called computer all the time, the laptop, and she likes to press those keyboards. It's like sending messages to everyone. She loves that.
Message from Oren. That's probably it's like it's not readable. It's probably that's the situation that's going on there. So, okay, well, I guess there's no questions. We would welcome your feedback on the session and event. I am aiming with our marketing team on having at least one of these every month or two where we're going to have a quick session with you guys. If you have subjects that you'd like us to address, topics that you'd like us to go into, feel free to do so. If you would like to be a guest speaker and talk about something that's relevant to you, we welcome that as well. So whatever
I think there's a question, Dave, from Patrick.
Patrick, oh.
If we can expand on shift left. Yes. What does it mean?
Shift left?
Yes.
So, okay. So the notion, testing always had sort of its spot, right? So if you look at what we call traditional waterfall development, you'd have everything just flowed like a waterfall down, right? So you'd have project design, and then you'd have project development, and then you'd have a QA phase, and then you'd have a push into prod, and a go live, right? And that would be it. And that, like Oren would say, would happen every 6 months, a year, whatever that may be. A project was sort of scoped in that notion. And agile projects sort of broke that down and said we can't wait 6 months, a year before we do QA, before we actually have a sounding board from the customer either, because it could steer off in a different direction and so forth. It was about taking that project, breaking it down into smaller sprints, and getting much more proactive feedback on how things evolve. And naturally, that implies changing testing, because initially what happened is agile changed and then testing remained traditional. So your sprints would happen in 2-3 weeks, and then QA would get involved and say, okay, so now we got to do a month of testing, and that would just break everything, and there was frustrations.
Yeah.
So the shift left notion is about saying, do testing as soon as possible in the process, find out where you can test something and test it out as fast as possible, right? And basically look at any test scenario that you have and say, okay, so where is the fastest point that I can do this test, and I can validate and put a checkbox that that's done. And you'll often hear that notion with the notion of shift right as well, which is funny because it's kind of the other spectrum, is to say, okay, so it's great that we're doing things faster in dev, but there are certain things like performance validation and so forth that we need to shift certain things, security testing and performance validation more towards the production side of things as well, and then proactively take data from production and bring it forward. So we often see this almost dual stretch out of the middle zone from either area. Anything you'd like to add, guys, on that?
Yeah, I could. The shift left mentality really came from reversing the pyramid of QA, doing a lot more unit testing. And there's two types of unit testing in that area. One was the traditional development unit testing, the JUnit type approach, but there's also the functional unit testing. QA would be starting on the early code that was deployed. So a lot of that stuff now, it's, for me anyway, I'm trying, like I explained in the presentation, I'm more trying to spread it out around each of the role from responsibility, and really aligning with the user experience to get the most out of it.
Excellent.
I think I see, by the way, the original I think originally shifting left, by the way, it doesn't stop at the developers. Like, right, you're talking about, oh, the QA here, there's the developers. There's two things. One, you can even shift the quality testing, even to the product specs. Like, I know that for us, there's no such thing as even the development don't even start before whenever the specs, when you want to say, this is what we want to do, the quality engineers are actually involved in that area as well, giving their feedback and thinking. Because if you find a problem in the spec, think about how, as we said, find it as early as possible. It saves you the time and energy to solve it. So think about if you night before you even started developing, you found out that there's a problem here. It doesn't work. It's not going to work the way it is. So that was a huge time saver. I think that was initially when things like Cucumber. It's not just about the gherkin language and the give and when. I think the notion there back then was a lot. Hey, we want to say that product would use this, and there will be one place where we'll put in the spec that all the stakeholders will take a look. I think that plan didn't work, and eventually I think mostly QA adopted that, but not product. I think they're still in the shift left paradigm. I think it kind of stopped at the developer stage. And one more thing, I think that it's not just the developer saying, hey, I want only unit test. I think there's two things. I think that they do have a requirement to get the feedback fast. A developer, if they're committing 20 times a day, they're not going to wait 2 hours to get for every one of those to get the feedback. They want something fast. They want something in a language that they know how to work with. So I'll give you an example. Why those unit tests are really good fit, because one, they're super fast. They can take seconds or minutes. And the second thing is that a lot of them are usually even in the same language. Think about when you do end-to-end testing and you're a front-end developer, and so you do JavaScript, and then your end-to-end testing is in Java or C#. And because usually they used to fit it to the backend, what in the organization, the language for that would be something so the backend engineers would help them if they need to. because front end wasn't as rich as much as today. Today, JavaScript is becoming the most popular language. So, by the way, there's always a dilemma because you always have backend or front end. Sometimes it's different languages. Then you're saying, wait a second, automation. Which language should it be? Should it fit more the front end or the backend? So I'm diverging a bit. But the ideas that of shifting left is, again, getting things that are done in the process later stage, get them earlier in the process as much as possible in order to get the feedback sooner. And the reason, of course, that it saves you a lot of time, and of course that relates to money. That means you ship faster because you fix the bug earlier. It takes you less time to fix it, and also it means that you release faster. So it saves you the money, the amount of time, which correlates to money, but also releasing faster. That's what people want. They want to release faster.
Good.
Excellent.
All right. Well, seeing that we're not getting any, did we get any more? Let's see. Georgic has a question. With the notion of DevOps and shift left, responsibilities of developers increased. Does it mean, let's say, Java developers also must know API testing, automation, and load to perf testing tools and skills? Isn't it too much?
It's a good point. I mean, I think that that's one of the reasons why we're seeing more this notion that Microsoft came up with of the SDET, right? I think that you're going to take a traditional tester who's closer to the business and turn them into an SDET, it's unrealistic. SDET and the roles of developer level testing requires a specific skill set and capability and an understanding of the whole development cycle and process. What I think is you're going to see with this shifting importance towards quality across the board and ownership of quality within all departments, you're going to see more and more organizations investing in that specific role of an SDET who will be the owner of those types of tasks, of types of testing and gates and validation from a dev perspective. But by no means do I believe that this is going to eliminate the need for testing from a business perspective as well. Who don't look at it from a visibility of the code, but look at it from a criticality of the business transactions and the end user experience and things of that nature. Yeah. I think it's just a division into two types of roles.
Yeah, Dave, I think shift left here doesn't mean consolidating the roles or some of the expertise you need, right? So, and if you got somebody who knows more than just functional testing or performance testing and it has a lot more background, then great, right? But here, shift left does not mean that you're trying to consolidate your QA team in one person or two person, right?
Yeah, agreed. Good question though, and it's true that we have to be aware that there are new emerging roles within QA and new skill sets that are by the nature of things changing, being developed, new titles and new roles. And it's an exciting time to be in QA and sort of have that ability to sort of choose where you want to specialize per your own things that you're passionate about and the types of activities and roles that you want to do from a QA perspective. There's much more, it's a much broader spectrum of things that you can do from a QA perspective and to help drive and improve quality, right? Than when it was 15, 20 years ago. So
yeah, I think learning is great. Like I enjoy learning. So for me, learning new things, it's almost like a hobby. So I think that it's not a dilemma for me. It's like, oh, should I learn about API testing? Why not? Yeah. I think it will be fun. It will like to learn new ways of the way of also thinking and how it correlates to the business. Woohoo!
All right, guys. So we don't have any more questions. One last question is for all three of you. David, let's start with you. In very few words, two things that people should be looking out for in 2021. Your top picks.
my top picks for 2021.
Yeah.
I think 2021 for me, is going to be around. Well, look, I'll tell you what I'm seeing so far. Right, what I'm seeing so far is about process improvement and tool alignment to proper processes within organizations. Right, so we're being
Mhm.
called upon to assist organizations in upgrading their landscape of tools and technologies and sort of determining best practices and strategies on how they can get more value out of that, right? And align it with the strategies and fit it into the new development methodologies and so forth. So I would say that that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot of right now. It's about saying, okay, so are we doing the right things, and are we focusing on the right things, and do we have the right tools and versions in place to be able to maximize the value and fill the need? And the other
Mhm.
thing I think it sort of ties into it is, are we measuring all that accordingly, right, as a QA organization? Again, in line with that notion of business value, are, for the dollars that we're investing towards QA, are we setting in place the methodologies and the capacity for us to quantify that back to business outcome and business values? Because I think it's becoming more and more critical, and it's being more and more demanded by the business to say, what you're spending there, we need to be able to say that it's deriving this value. It doesn't matter that you're spending X amount of dollars, and it could be a significant amount of dollars, but if it quantifies to business wins on the other end and it helps grow the business, then it's an investment and not
Sounds
just
all
a
good.
cost. So I know sort of justifying that QA is not just a cost center, but it's an investment to help you grow your business. I'd say that's a critical aspect about setting all that up so that you can actually report that back. So those are the things that I would bring forward as a two.
And also for long-term savings as well.
Absolutely.
Oren.
I hate to agree with David. It can't be that we all agree all the time. But I think first of all, as you said, like focusing on what's good for the business, what's going to make an impact, and whether that's start from the top and understanding what are the metrics, how can we make sure that what we're doing is the right thing, and focusing on the right thing, and do focus on the processes of how to have a quality. I think quality is a company initiative. It's not just, hey, there's a one person that cares about quality. Everyone needs to care about quality, and everyone should
Absolutely.
care about from the beginning, from quality is not just the testing, it's also the process, and how do we check things from the beginning, making sure that we're building the best product in the best way. And I think another focus would be on also collaboration. It depends on the size of the company, of course, but
Yeah.
obviously when it's 50 people, everyone sits in we're not right now sitting in the same room, but it used to be that they're all together as opposed to large organizations. But I think it has to be, there's no such, hey, is there QA team here and developer? I think the collaboration between the two is something more
Absolutely.
so that you should strive toward.
There needs to be more mixing of the teams.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Luigi, your final thoughts?
Yeah, two things. Again, as a QA team, I would align my strategy around user experience from an end-to-end aspect, understanding the business scenario. And then if you want to introduce some of the AI aspect we just talked, don't need to read more about it or understand too much. You can implement a tool, let's say this from Aaron, a company Test IM, and start to look at what benefit it will bring back to your testing strategy. And I think that's a great way to start.
Great.
Yeah, Nora, it's funny, guys. I was thinking as we were going through this conclusion that there's a whole other topic that we could have that would be really interesting around the notion of what do we fit into a testing practice, and as we go through the transformation towards agile development, what are the gates that should be in place, right? So often people will think about testing as far as just testing the application functionality, and often there are no formal gates when it comes to performance or security testing, or all kinds of other very critical areas that are kind of left to the side, or not really properly gated. And that's maybe something that I would love to see more formality around the way that you you treat those things and assure that you got a checkbox before you push something into prod, because I think everybody would agree that, you know, a security failure is disastrous when it happens, right? Or a performance issue where, you know, your application looks great, runs great, but as soon as you hit 5 users, it starts slowing down and crashing is, again, extremely bad, right? And results to lost business. So anyway, maybe some future subject, but I digress. I thank our guests, Luigi and Oren, for joining us. Always a pleasure, boys. Thank our team from an SQALogic perspective for coordinating this. You know me, I'm always happy to get on these things and talk with people. And foremost than all, I'd like to thank all of our attendees. If you have any questions or you'd like to extend the dialogue with us, feel free to reach out through any one of the channels that are there. And as I said, this session has been recorded. It will be live on our YouTube channel as well as available via the Zoom platform for review after the fact. We thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.